I'm not going to do my Gianni Infantino impersonation because I don't have one. Let's let Gianni do one for himself. The man at
Literally.
the top of FIFA, yeah, literally. He got behind a desk yesterday, somewhere in Switzerland, and announced who would be hosting the 2030 and the 2034 World Cups. And of course, bear in mind that his audience were all the delegates all around the world listening on Zoom. Have a listen.
So that we can see your acclamation, please raise your hands when you're asked to do the acclamation near your head. Acclamation. That the hosts of the FIFA World Cup 2030 will be Morocco, Portugal and Spain. Mabruk, felicitations, parabéns, felicidades. And last but not least, it is a great pleasure that the host of the FIFA World Cup 2034 will be Saudi Arabia. Mabruk, Mabruk to our friends in Riyadh.
And that was that. Ooh. Can I have your acclamation? Now, what Gianni
What a big reveal that was. No one saw that one coming. It was like waiting outside the Vatican for the puff of smoke to come up. You didn't know who it was going to be.
Can I have your acclamation, said Gianni. And for those who don't know, acclamation means loud and enthusiastic approval. So can I have your loud and enthusiastic approval? All the delegates all around the world. Anyway, you got something of a muted burst of applause there. The 2030 World Cup, we know, Spain, Portugal and Morocco, they'll be the main hosts. There'll also be a match each played in Uruguay, Argentina and Paraguay to mark the centenary of the first World Cup. So the 2030 World Cup is kind of all over the place. The 2034 World Cup, Saudi Arabia. 11 new stadiums planned and 4 more refurbished in what is described as the biggest and most expensive sports construction project ever undertaken. So these 2 World Cups, Simon, arguably bigger and bolder than we've seen before, but will they be better?
Well, that remains to be seen. I mean, the numbers that I've seen that are being attached to what Saudi are doing is astronomical. I mean, we're talking about £1 trillion being spent. A lot of it's to do with the development of Neon City and the connectivity of the Middle East and Silicon Valley that they're trying to build there. So there's a lot more behind it. But the actual spend on football is somewhere in the region of, I don't know, 10, 15, 20 billion on stadiums. I think it's even more than that. So it's astronomical. So if you're looking at infrastructure and facilities, then I would suspect that it has all this opportunity. The success of Qatar was the connectivity of the experience because everything was played so locally.
Yeah.
The infrastructure that was built, I know the arguments and the well-rehearsed arguments and well-founded arguments about the manner in which these stadiums were built, the migrants that lost their lives and the challenges to workers' rights that came as a result of it, and FIFA's refusal, it seems, to adhere to what their own policies were. But as far as a football tournament, if we just take away that noise, which I know that people won't want to, but from a football point of view, Qatar was a resounding success. So there's little reason to believe that Saudi wouldn't be as well.
Yeah.
This is the reality. This is the money that now is available from Saudi in football, and bankrolling opportunities for FIFA is astronomical. Whether people like it or not, they better get their head around it.
Of course. Nobody, it was the only bid for 2034.
Yeah.
The Saudis was the only bid in town because any others must have thought, well, there's no point because what can we do? You mentioned this futuristic city.
Wasn't there also an element of the fact that it was concocted to be this way so that no one could really bid because they only announced that they were going to announce a 2034 so short in order that no one really had time to prepare for it because Australasia were going to prepare for it, weren't they?
Yeah. But when, as you rightly say, I mean, when you look at what the Saudis are going to try and do, and I heard this and I thought, are you kidding? One of the stadiums has been proposed in the planned futuristic city of Neom.
Yep.
You mentioned it. Built 350 metres in the air and serviced by driverless vehicles and high-speed lifts. But the city itself is yet to be built.
Yeah.
The Saudis will do that in a flash. They'll do that in a heartbeat.
They don't have Greenbelt, do they?
The stadium, 350 metres in the sky, driverless vehicles and high-speed lifts.
It's 1,000 feet, isn't it?
I'm trying to get that into my mind as to what that experience is going to be like going to the stadium that day for that match. And it's going to be like nothing we have ever known.
No.
Nobody can compete with that.
No. And absolutely they're not going to either. I mean, ultimately, the awarding of the tournaments are based upon certain criteria. One would be led to believe that different regions and different continents have to do them on a rota. And now we've got the Gulf states in the mix. They are in this rota, and they have this opportunity. Again, I refer to the arguments that raged, and they're salient arguments about human rights and the issues that about awarding a World Cup, what it means.
Yeah.
But as far as a tournament is concerned, Qatar was a success. Now, there's no reason to suggest that Saudi won't be a success. There will be people that object very strongly to how this was created, how this opportunity, how they were just anointed. This wasn't a competitive bidding tender. This was an anointment. This was basically, it wasn't an acclamation. It was a proclamation of something that had already been predetermined. And Saudi were getting this World Cup, and that was the end of the discussion. And some, and rightly so, will join the dots up and go, right, our FIFA are going to get control of certain things. Well, the FIFA World Cup Championship needed some money. The Saudis will be behind it as their main sponsor. Probably DAZN is going to end up with the Saudis. That's a broadcast platform. It is what it is. Football and money and power and influence are the order of the day. And it isn't just FIFA behind some closed wall.
No.
It's across the board.
So it begs the question, the 2030 World Cup, Spain, Portugal, Morocco, and then some matches in Uruguay, Argentina and Paraguay to mark the centenary of the first World Cup. But then the final itself will be in Spain and Madrid and Morocco in the planned contenders for the final game.
Yeah.
Spain with Madrid and Morocco with the planned 115,000 seat Grand Stade Hassan II Stadium in Casablanca.
Yeah.
And that would be the biggest stadium in the world, you won't be surprised to hear. And then we look 4 years further down the line at the World Cup in Saudi Arabia. And as Simon and I have just discussed, one of the games in this futuristic city of Neom, 350 metres in the air in the sky, you got to go up into the sky to watch the match. That basically is how you got to do it. So that's 2030 and that's 2034. We know 2026 is in the US and Mexico.
Yeah.
Where's the UK in all of this? We're never going to host a World Cup, are we? How do you compete with what 2030 and more specifically 2034 is going to be doing? Where on earth does the United Kingdom feature in this?
Well, it depends.
What have we got to offer?
Well, we've got a massive football infrastructure and the iconic Premier League and iconic stadiums like Wembley. The challenge is that this is a commercial enterprise that's about generating revenue for FIFA. And some would say, well, that's a good thing because it's a not-for-profit and it distributes back to the grassroots. Yeah, okay, if you believe that. And these guys sitting in positions of influence like Gianni Infantino that seems to think he's the Pope are not getting huge benefits from this. And we've seen the idea of how FIFA is hung together. Don't believe this is in isolation when you've seen Chuck Blazer and the fella that was that was it the Barbadian or Trinidadian Jack Warner. And all that. I mean, there's some
sure,
leopards and spots.
Yeah.
But the bottom line is that if the only criteria now is the economic, the only reason that America got this World Cup is because Trump told FIFA he guaranteed them $15 billion. Now Saudi, that falls out of their way on the way to the game. The Saudis. Yeah. So the scales have been raised. Now, if the only decisions that are being made, and if FIFA are going to be held accountable for their policies, then it has to be swinging around Europe and opportunities because England should want a World Cup. They tried in 2012. They didn't read the room in the slightest. They didn't know what was going on. With the greatest respect to David Dean and David Beckham and whoever, and Prince William, whoever else they seconded in, they got made to look a bit foolish in that particular bid. I don't know how FIFA will evolve, how much more transparent it'll become, how far-reaching their governance. We can't see what FIFA is going to be and the next round of bids when it becomes the 2038 and the 2042 and so on and so forth. Yeah. So the criteria may change. I wouldn't rule us out. I wouldn't rule us in. There doesn't seem to be a huge appetite from many people to host World Cups because they're not as profitable. And Saudi are not running this World Cup because they think it's going to be an economic success. It's the gateway for a raft of other things that they want to be, whether they want to put a free port into Dubai, whether they want to do this or whether they want to do that. They're changing the landscape of their culture. Their society is changing. We've already spoken about Mohammed bin Salman and his viewpoint of what his nation consists of now, which is 60% of the people are below 30 years of age. They want entertainment. They want Western culture as part of their culture. That's why I think they'll probably end up buying a movie studio. They've got sport now on speed dial, and they're using it for influence because sport, probably even more than politics and any other walk of life, is so powerful and so influencing that the Saudis are dialing into it. And the World Cup, with the exception of the Olympics, is the greatest show on earth.
I mean, by the time 2034 comes along, maybe the Saudis, in every sense, will be the football capital of the world. Maybe Bellingham's playing out there by then. Maybe Lamine Yamal is playing out there by then.
The difficulty is that you can port players around, but the legacy of football clubs are. I look at the idea that, you know, someone like Cristiano Ronaldo, again, I use the example of the Pope. He's got more followers than the Pope.
Yeah.
These people have got more influence than certain people than you'd ever imagine.
The Pope's getting a lot of mentions, isn't he?
I know, because it's you know, because one thinks he's like it, and the other because he's, you know, ultimately got such a huge following. But the scenario is that I still believe that legacy football clubs are where the Saudis are going to have difficulty building up their leagues and building up the value of their football clubs. Is that you've got this seeded capital in Liverpool, in Manchester City, in Manchester United, in Bayern Munich, in Barcelona, in Real Madrid, which is going to take several generations to be able to overcome, if it can ever be overcome.
Yeah. I wonder when you have to set off for that game in the futuristic city of Neom. We need to get there early, because remember, it's 350 metres in the air, and we've got to get in one of these driverless vehicles or a high-speed lift. That city of Neom yet to be built, but the Saudis will do it, being no doubt about that.
Jim White and Simon Jordan. Monday to Friday mornings from 10 on AM, on DAB, via the talkSPORT app and on your smart speaker. talkSPORT.